Biblical prophecies about Iran have been read for centuries as predictions of destruction, and that reading is inverted. Daniel 10 names an entity, the Sar Paras, prince of the kingdom of Persia, that held back an archangel for 21 days and blocks the revelation about the end of times. What you read as geopolitics in that region is the pulse of something that operates in a register where armies and sanctions don't apply. The land that first named the battle between light and darkness, the cradle of Zarathustra, became the place where darkness governs, dressed in the words of light. Two esoteric traditions, separated by centuries, converge on the same conclusion. The dissolution of what imprisons that land is the condition for the revelation about human destiny to be completed. The prophecies about Iran don't describe the end of a people. They describe the removal of what prevents that people, and all of us, from accessing what comes next.
Daniel 10 opens with a scene no commentary has adequately explained. The angel Gabriel declares to Daniel that he tried to deliver a message for 21 days and couldn't. He was held back. The name of what held him is in the Hebrew text, Sar Paras, the prince of the kingdom of Persia, an entity that blocked an archangel for 3 weeks, and that was only neutralized when Michael intervened. 2 archangels mobilized against a single entity. That gives you the scale of what's at stake in that land. The difference between a prophecy of destruction and a prophecy of liberation is the difference between watching a fire and realizing the fire is melting a chain. Daniel records the dissolution of what keeps a people locked inside it, and the key to that reading lies in a system the rabbinic tradition built around this passage. The foundation is in Deuteronomy 32:8 and the map of nations in Genesis 10, 70 peoples, 70 spiritual rulers, the Sarim. Every nation has a Sar, a prince who operates on a plane that no political instrument can detect. What happens in the field of the Sar determines what happens in the field of visible facts. When the Sar is aligned with the mission of the people it governs, that people acts in the world with an impulse that transcends economics and diplomacy, something prior to any force we can measure. When the Sar falls or is corrupted, the people loses access to that impulse. It continues to exist, but what it produces no longer carries what once distinguished it. Like an instrument whose tuning is altered at the source, the strings still vibrate, the music still plays, but the sound no longer carries what once made it unmistakable. The sequence Gabriel reveals confirms this architecture. He says that after the Sar Paras will come the Sar Yavan, the prince of Greece. The order he describes on the angelic plane is the order that history executed. Persian dominion fell, Greek dominion rose. The Greece that produced the perception of the logos and philosophy, the impulse its Sar sustained, became the Greece of Alexandrian conquest. When the Sar completed its cycle, that original impulse vanished from the world. The civilization continued. What made it Greek in the deepest sense was gone. The pattern applies to every nation governed by a Sar, including Persia. We call this civilizational decline and attribute it to material factors. The system of the Sarim proposes something no conventional historiography can articulate, a cause prior to all visible causes, one that precedes economy, precedes strategy, precedes every instrument the visible world uses to explain itself. This stayed with me for days. If the fall of the ancient Persian Empire was preceded by the neutralization of the Sar Paras, what does the continued presence of that Sar over contemporary Iran mean? What happens in the field of that ruler when the news reports sanctions, revolutions, military alliances? Gabriel answers in 10:14. He says he came to reveal what will happen in the last days, at the end of times. The message he carried concerned the closing of a cycle that involves all of humanity. And what held that message back for 3 weeks was the Sar Paras. No other Sar receives this position in the text. The Sar Yavan is mentioned as a successor, not as a blocker of revelation. The Sar Paras occupies a singular place. It is the entity whose active presence prevents humanity from accessing information about what comes after everything we know. This places that land at the center of Daniel's prophetic system, not by geographic accident, but by spiritual function. If the Sar Paras held Gabriel back for 3 weeks, what imprisons that people demands a response on the scale of archangels. If God is the origin of everything, where does what opposes God come from? The question is a wall, 2 paths, both blocked. If evil comes from God, divine goodness is compromised. The source of everything includes what destroys everything. If evil has its own origin, something exists outside of God, and the notion of a single source collapses. The Kabbalah of Isaac Luria found a third way, and that way broke the deadlock. The divine light, as it emanated, needed vessels, the Sephiroth, to be contained and differentiated. The higher ones withstood the intensity, wisdom, compassion, understanding. The lower ones broke. The name of that event is Shevirat HaKalem, the shattering of the vessels. The breaking was the condition for the world to exist as a place of work. If the vessels had withstood all the light, there would be no space between source and creation, no darkness to illuminate, no separation to reunite, no fragment to gather. The human mission presupposes the shattering. Without broken vessels, there is nothing to repair. Without imprisoned sparks, there is nothing to liberate. And the sparks dispersed. Nitzotzot, fragments of divine light, fell into the lower worlds, where they were imprisoned in shells called klipo. Shells that feed on light without returning it, that consume divine presence without radiating it. Evil, in this system, is the presence of God captured in something that consumes it. If evil were absence, it would be enough to fill it. Being imprisoned presence, the work is liberation. And what needs to be liberated is inside what imprisons it. This disturbed me when I understood the implication. We recognize evil when it's opaque, explicit violence, open denial, declared destruction. The opaque klipo are 3, and they operate that way. Pure resistance, with no light of their own. You know what you're facing. You can resist. You can refuse. The 4th klipa operates differently. It's called klipat noga, the shell of brightness. It possesses luminosity, light that curved upon itself and began serving its own perpetuation. It is the only shell that can be elevated back to holiness because it retains real sparks. And it is the hardest to identify as evil because it shines. The functional distinction the system offers is this: authentic light emanates. It illuminates what's around it without demanding return. Like a bonfire that warms those who approach without asking for anything back. Imprisoned light consumes. It draws toward itself, feeds the shell, strengthens the vessel at the expense of what should radiate. Like a vortex that pulls everything inward. The difference between a spiritual center that liberates and one that enslaves lies in the direction of that flow. A power that speaks in the name of God, that recites sacred texts, that wears spiritual authority, but uses all of it to consolidate dominion and punish deviation, operates within the klipat noga. It shines, it convinces, and it convinces because there's something real inside it. The imprisoned sparks give the shell its appearance of legitimacy, and this creates a problem no conventional opposition can solve. When a power denies the sacred, we can fight it with faith. When a power uses the sacred as an instrument, faith becomes its weapon. The more faith we bring to the confrontation, the more it feeds. The Zohar describes a period called Shevle Mashiach, the birth pangs of the Messiah. It is the moment when the klipat noga reaches maximum intensity. The shell consumes the last reserves of imprisoned light to maintain its cohesion. It appears stronger than ever, more consolidated, more absolute, and then it ruptures through internal excess. The sparks inside it destroy it from within. The shell that fed on the light is dissolved by the very light it held captive. Every time the shell strengthens, it moves closer to the point where what it imprisoned destroys it. The shell never burns brighter than in the instant before it cracks. The shell is not defeated by an army, it is defeated by what it captured. The first civilization to perceive that the cosmos is a battlefield between two intelligences, one luminous and one cold, was Persia. This perception was born from direct sight, a man who perceived the cosmic battlefield without the mediation of philosophy. Zarathustra brought to the world the first formulation of the problem every spiritual tradition after him would inherit. There exists a luminous intelligence, Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom, and a cold intelligence, Ahriman, and the battlefield between them is human existence. Before him, civilizations perceived forces of nature as expressions of the divine, sun, rain, fertility. Zarathustra saw something different, that light is not a phenomenon, it is will. That darkness carries intention, an intelligence with its own project. A later esoteric tradition identified Ahura Mazda as the form through which a cosmic being, who would later incarnate, manifested to the spiritual perception of that era. Persia was the first people to recognize this presence operating within history as a force that moved events, not a theological abstraction. This places Persia in a position no other ancient people occupies. We speak of founding civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and each carried its own impulse. The Persian impulse was the most radical. The awareness that the cosmos has a side working in favor of human evolution and a side working against it, and that every human act feeds one or the other. The importance of the Persian founder is sacrificial. His individuality donated his spiritual structures, what that tradition calls the higher bodies, to the stream that prepared the vessel for the future incarnation of that cosmic being. He gave everything he was to the preparation of that incarnation. To understand the weight of this donation, imagine a river that feeds a valley for millennia. One day, the river is diverted, deliberately, by someone who understands the water is needed more urgently elsewhere. The valley is not destroyed, but it dries. The vegetation that depended on that flow begins to die, and the empty riverbed becomes a channel through which anything can flow. This struck me when I grasped the implication for Iran. The land that first named the light was left without it, not as punishment, as donation. Persia did not lose its original impulse through failure or sin. It lost it because its founder did exactly what he was supposed to do, gave everything in the name of something greater. And what was left behind? The memory, the names, the sacred words without the presence that animated them, became the perfect material for an inversion. And the inversion happened. The land that first distinguished light from darkness came to be governed by a power that uses light as an instrument of darkness. The Zoroastrian reverence for fire as a symbol of Ahura Mazda became a tool of theocratic coercion. The distinction between good and evil that Zarathustra revealed as inner perception, something that awakens from within the human being, was converted into an external penal code. The duality that was meant to liberate began to oppress. The same words, the same vocabulary, the same structure of revelation, with the flow inverted. It's as if someone kept the street name but reversed the direction of traffic. Whoever enters thinking they're walking forward is walking backward. Darkness didn't need to invent its own language. It hijacked the language of light. And the hijacking is so effective because the foundation is genuine. Persia really was the first to perceive what it perceived. That historical authenticity is what gives the shell that now surrounds it its appearance of legitimacy. What governs that land since then doesn't deny the sacred. It occupies the architecture of the sacred and operates it in reverse. It uses the founder's vocabulary against the founder's purpose. And the people living under this cannot perceive the inversion, because the texts are there, the rituals are there, the spiritual authorities are there. What's missing is what the founder brought and what no longer exists in that soil, the living impulse that gave the words their original meaning. Ezekiel 38:5 names Paras as a component of the coalition led by Gog. The Hebrew name is the same as in Daniel 10. The Persia that joins Gog's prophetic coalition belongs to the same field as the Sar Paras that blocks revelation. Persia as a force that resists the advance of the divine plan. The Zohar reads the war of Gog and Magog in a register different from the military. It is the final coalescence of the forces of the Sitra Akra, the other side. The moment when everything operating against the divine plan converges at a point of maximum concentration. While these forces are dispersed, they are effective because they are invisible. They corrode without exposing themselves. They parasitize without being identified. No one fights what they cannot name. When they converge, when they coalesce into a block with a name, a face, and a declared alliance, they lose the protection of invisibility. Concentration is the moment when the shell tries to compensate through mass for what it lost by exposing itself. Like a parasite leaving the organism where it was hidden, now it can be seen. Now it can be removed. Ezekiel's prophecy describes the divine response with three elements that the Zohar reads as operations on the spiritual plane. First, in 38:19, the earthquake, an eruption of forces from the upper world that shakes the coalition structure from its foundation. Second, in 38:21, confusion among the allies, each turns his sword against the other. And third, in 38:22, fire and brimstone, dissolution from above. The confusion among allies is the critical detail. Ezekiel doesn't describe a defeat by an external army. He describes the coalition decomposing from within. Forces united solely by common resistance lose cohesion when the pressure from above increases. Gog's allies are not real allies. They are aggregations that share an enemy. When pressure comes from above, each component tries to preserve itself. The alliance dissolves from the inside out. We have observed this pattern repeatedly in that region. Blocks that seemed monolithic revealed fissures under pressure. Alliances declared as eternal fragmented when the cost of maintaining them exceeded the benefit. Conventional analysis attributes this to divergent interests and opportunism. The Zohar's reading attributes it to something prior. Artificially united shells cannot sustain cohesion when the force pressuring them operates in a register higher than what united them. I thought about what this means for how we read that region today. Every declared alliance, every military bloc, every pact of resistance, in Ezekiel's reading filtered through the Zohar, is a step toward exposure. The shell trades effectiveness for visibility. And for a shell, visibility is vulnerability. The Shahina, the divine presence in exile, returns at this moment with an intensity that dissolves what is shell and releases what is spark. The eruption described in Ezekiel 38 is surgically precise. It dissolves the aggregation. What was shell falls apart. What was spark inside the shell survives. The prophecy turns on this distinction. The destruction is selective. The shell dissolves. The sparks that were inside it, captured divine presence, imprisoned original impulse, are set free. Ezekiel's war is waged against the shell that holds a people captive, not against the people inside it. Ezekiel 39:29 closes the arc with a sentence that carries the full weight of this distinction. I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the house of Israel." The Zohar identifies this verse as the mark of completed Tikkun Olam. The war is the penultimate act. The dissolution of the coalition is the condition for restoration. And restoration presupposes that within the coalesced shell there are sparks that survive the rupture and return to their original function. Ezekiel's destruction is the precondition of restoration, the moment the lock finally breaks. Denying the spiritual and imitating it are two fundamentally different operations. Denial is honest in its hostility. You know where you stand. Imitation inhabits the form of what it imitates and hollows it from within. And because the form remains intact, the inversion becomes invisible. A European esoteric tradition mapped this second type of opposition with a precision that forced me to reread everything I thought I knew about that region. It identifies a cold intelligence, the same one Zarathustra called Ahriman, that operates through hardening. It transforms what was alive into mechanism, impulse into regulation, prophecy into enforcement. The result resembles spirituality. It has texts, rituals, hierarchies, authorities, but it has lost something that tradition calls warmth. Warmth, here, is a technical concept. It is the quality that distinguishes living thought from crystallized thought, the morality that is born from within from the one imposed from without. An authentic spiritual teaching awakens something in the human being that acts on its own, that recognizes truth because it perceives it, not because it's compelled to repeat it. A hardened teaching dictates what the human being must do and punishes any deviation. In one case, the human being opens upon participating. In the other, contracts. The external structure may be indistinguishable. What happens inside the people is opposite. This tradition teaches that every people possesses a spiritual guide, an archangel that sustains the mission of that civilization. When this guide operates freely, the people has access to the impulse that defines it. When it is blocked or captured, the people continues to exist, but disconnected from its vocation. It acts in the world without knowing why it acts. The spiritual guide of Persia had a mission to reveal that a battle between light and darkness exists, and that the human being is the field of that battle. When that guide was captured by impulses that operate in the opposite direction, the people continued to speak of light and darkness, but what it names as light already serves the cold intelligence it was meant to resist, and here the lines converge. What Daniel describes as the Sar Paras, the entity that blocks revelation on the angelic plane, is the same phenomenon that Lurianic Kabbalah describes as klipat noga, the shell that shines with hijacked light, and that this European tradition describes as spiritual hardening, living warmth replaced by cold mechanism. Three traditions, separated by centuries, with no direct contact among them. Daniel sees the blockage from above, from the plane of archangels. Kabbalah dissects what the blockage is made of, how the shell imprisons and consumes. The European tradition shows how it registers in human experience, a people living under a spirituality that resembles the original, but has lost what made it alive. Together they produce a reading of the prophecies about Iran that none of them, in isolation, can articulate. And all three converge on a conclusion. What the prophets call judgment upon that land is the collapse of this hijacking, the liberation of the original guide, the reconnection of the Persian people with the impulse of Zarathustra, who distinguished light from darkness before any other people in history. Jeremiah 49:39 corresponds, in this cross-reading, to the restoration of the original mission. The moment the captured guide is released, and the people recovers access to the impulse of its founder. We are looking at prophecies about Iran that three different traditions read as the same event, the removal of a lock. And what that lock keeps closed, the revelation about the end of times, does not belong only to that people, it belongs to everyone. I will bring upon Elam the 4 winds from the 4 quarters of heaven, and scatter them to all those winds. There will be no nation where Elam's exiles do not go. Those words were written more than 2,500 years ago, and they describe with precision what happened after 1979. The Iranian diaspora became one of the most geographically distributed in the world. Iranians in Los Angeles, in Toronto, in Berlin, in Sydney, in Sao Paulo, everywhere. Lurianic Kabbalah reads the scattering of a people in a way that inverts what the word normally carries. Every dispersion operates within the structure of Galut HaShekhinah, the exile of the divine presence. And the meaning of that exile is the opposite of the obvious: mechanism, not punishment. While a people is concentrated in a territory under the dominion of a shell, the sparks imprisoned in that nation are inaccessible. The shell keeps them captive. In that soil, under that pressure, the sparks cannot be rescued. When the people scatters, the sparks move with them, and in every new land, they come into contact with a different cultural soil, where they can germinate in ways that would be impossible in the original territory. Every Iranian who arrives in a new nation carries fragments of Zarathustra's legacy, of the original Persian revelation about cosmic duality. These fragments are not conscious in the individual. They are not doctrines he recites. They are sparks. They operate like seeds, planted in a soil that didn't produce them, where they sprout in ways no one foresaw, because there, in the land of origin, the shell kept them inert. This gave me a different perspective on what happened to that people. We look at the scattering and see tragedy: separated families, fragmented identities, uprooted lives. The pain is real. The displacement is real. But what moves with the people is not just culture or memory. They are sparks of something that belongs to the original plan of creation, and that only become accessible when the shell that held them imprisoned is broken by the very fragmentation. The moment the nation fragments is the moment the sparks become accessible to the world. The breaking frees what wholeness kept captive. And Jeremiah closes the cycle with a promise no other people in that chapter receives. Moab, Ammon, Edom, all receive judgment in that passage. None receives restoration, only Elam, only Persia. But it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares the Lord. The only nation in that entire chapter that hears a promise after judgment. In the Lurianic framework, Elam receives restoration because its sparks are necessary for tikkun olam, the repair of the world. The sowing precedes the harvest. The scattering precedes the reintegration. And the reintegration does not reconstitute the old vessel. It produces something that could only exist after the breaking, after the scattering, after the rescue of sparks in different soils. The tikkun does not undo the shevarat. It completes it. The prophecies about Iran that opened this script, those read as predictions of destruction, describe, when cross-read through the traditions we have traversed, something radically different. The dissolution of a spiritual ruler that blocks revelation. The collapse of a shell that imprisons light with the vocabulary of light. The scattering of sparks that need to germinate in other soils for the repair of the world to be completed, and the restoration of a people, the first to name the battle between light and darkness, so that it can, at last, fulfill what was designated to it from the origin. The fire of the prophecies does not consume the house, it melts the chain, and what the chain held captive belongs to all of us. The prophets describe the dissolution of something that imprisons, and this imprisonment operates within every human being. Each of us carries shells that hold back fragments of our own light. The process of releasing these shells begins in the same place where the Persian founder had his first perception, in the deep silence of consciousness. We have developed audio tools based on frequencies that prepare the silence, that create the conditions for what is held within you to begin to be set free. To discover how to access this process and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video resonated with you, write in the comments, "It made sense to me,"